and welcome to All About Boston. I'm Seth McCoy. Tonight we have a jam-packed show. My first guest is City Councilor Felix Arroyo. He is running for mayor like all of my guests tonight. The second guest is Bill Walczak, and finally City Councilor Charles Yancey will be here. Like I mentioned in this first segment, I have City Councilor Felix Arroyo. If you have a question for him, please call us at 617-708-3290. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So last time I had you on, you were probably running for re-election, but I'm sure I had you on in between re-election and now. But you're running for mayor, which is very exciting. Why did you decide to run for mayor?
You know, I have over a decade experience of organizing at SEIU, where I was organizing janitors, security guards, building service workers. And many people don't see them, and some perceive them to be powerless. But in fact, we learned that by organizing, bringing people together, making sure they all had a voice, they indeed had power. And we won better wages, health benefits, and most importantly, the respect and dignity that they deserve. And I took that experience with me to the City Council, where now I'm in my 4th year of representing the entire city of Boston. Really privileged to have the job that I have today, where I continue to work with our residents in every neighborhood and ensuring that their voice is heard. When the opening for mayor happened, we knew that this was the moment to really take that vision to the mayor's office, a vision of a city where everyone has opportunities to succeed, the same opportunities that my family had. But you know, opportunities shouldn't begin and end with just some people. Everyone deserves them, and that's the vision we have, and we believe we get there by investing in our schools and our communities, but ensuring that people have a voice in the direction of our city.
So if you're elected, what's the first 3 things you want to do?
The first thing I would implement legislation that I've already written called Invest in Boston. We have over $1 billion in deposits in the city of Boston, and they're deposited in various banks. Yet we don't ask these banks if they do any business with our neighborhoods. We don't ask them if they lend to small businesses, lend to homeowners, refinance homes, hire Bostonians. We literally don't ask them if they do any level of investments in the communities where the money comes from. And so the legislation that I've written says if you want these deposits in your bank, and we're talking over $1 billion here, you have to tell us what you're doing in the neighborhoods. And it also says we will do business with the banks and the financial institutions that do the most work in our communities to ensure that there's investment in our communities. Small businesses start to open up, more jobs get created, people are able to buy homes, communities get stabilized, and that I would do immediately once we're elected.
What made you think about proposing something like that? Is this something you heard from residents where, you know, let's say I'm a small business owner, I'm trying to open up something, but I'm not finding financing from one of the big banks? Was that something you heard?
Absolutely. I've done a tour of every small business district in the city of Boston, and what I found from the small business owners across the city was the same idea that they couldn't access credit, and when they couldn't access credit, they couldn't expand their businesses, they couldn't create more jobs. Right. I speak periodically where people who have great business ideas and want to start a business in our city but can't access credit, so therefore not creating jobs. But then I also speak to families looking to buy homes who can't access credit to buy a home, so they don't set their roots here, they go someplace else. And I said, well, wait a second, what can we do to help spur that economic development? What can we do to make sure that our money comes back to our communities? I researched and I found that we have $1 billion in deposits. Well, that's leverage. And we tell the banks not how to do their business. They get to decide that. But we tell them, just let us know what you're doing in our city. And whoever's doing the most, we're going to do business with you. And what I believe you'll find is stronger small business districts, more home ownership, more Bostonians finding jobs. But another thing happens, when the unemployment rate goes down, so does the crime rate. And when neighborhoods are strong economically, so are the schools. And so it's a holistic approach of how do we have safe, livable, and affordable neighborhoods, good schools, and opportunities for those who live in our city.
You touched on something important, and that is that trying to keep people here in the city to buy homes, to put their kids into a public school system. How about just for young people getting out of college? What would you work on to try to get people who are just coming out of college from all our great universities in the area to stay here and invest in the city?
You know, I think a lot of people are surprised when they learn that 1 in 3 Bostonians is under the age of 35. However, what starts to happen is they start to leave. They don't set roots here. What we need to do is really look at, we do some affordable housing, and in fact, not enough. And in fact, not enough. And in Boston, they've never had a problem creating luxury housing. We don't do much moderate rate housing. And so it's about an intentional leadership that says we will have affordable housing, for families like mine when they first moved to Boston who needed to live in affordable subsidized housing before they were to buy the home in Hyde Park. Moderate housing for families like my sister who's married with 3 daughters, but makes too much as a school teacher to qualify for affordable housing, but not enough to buy a home. Right. And now she's in that mix. That's that middle class family that we want to stay in our city. And we have to make sure that it's an intentional act of creating that type of housing, looking at our zoning code and making sure we're not stopping it through zoning. There are some young professionals who are single that are prepared and willing to live in smaller units, but we don't allow it to happen. But we should. And so there's different ideas of how to get it done, but it has to be intentional. Government must invest in affordable and moderate rate housing, just like we must invest in public schools, public safety, and public streets, because that is not what the private sector does. Don't
you also have to get those developers to kind of buy into this notion? I mean, there's a ton of properties. I can think of one right now on Washington Street in Rosendale that has been vacant. I mean, maybe they sold 3 units, but nobody can afford to buy them, or it's not desirable enough for people to purchase there. But we have so many units that are up here when, you know, there are people like me who I'm more down here and could
middle
never even
class
think.
Boston is having a terrible time finding how to set their roots in our city. Housing, and then concerns about the schools, and then concerns about safety hits middle class families, and they say, you know what, maybe I'm going to check out someplace else. And it isn't because they don't want to be in Boston. In fact, they do. That development project you spoke to, and there'll be a number of others across the city. That happens because of poor planning. That happens because the community wasn't a part of the planning process. It happens because planning in our city is not as transparent as it should be. One of the proposals I make is that our BRA, which is responsible for economic development and development in our city, but they also do planning. And I believe that planning should be removed so that planning comes first. In other words, if you plan it, they will build it. And then you start planning for affordable, moderate, mixed housing, in which I strongly believe in mixed housing, And that's how you make sure our neighborhoods stay as diverse, not only by race and gender, but economically. And that, by planning, you'll see more of that type of housing developed.
I want to talk a little bit about public safety.
Absolutely.
We obviously we're in the middle of summer, if you will. We've had a number of shootings.
Too many.
Too many shootings. Probably not enough attention paid to them, in my opinion. We also had our current police commissioner who gave a quote, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said, well, it's summer and this is what happens. Is that an acceptable answer to you?
You know, I'm going to go right back to planning. This funny thing happens every year. July and August come. We know it's going to happen, and we understand that in the summer months, the crime rate, and particularly violent crime and shootings, go up. We know that trend. So we should be prepared for that before it happens. We should be looking at creating safe zones in our neighborhoods where the violence, 80% of our violence happens in specific neighborhoods. And the people in those neighborhoods deserve our support, right? And so we have to create safety places where young people who are looking to do constructive, safe things have a place to be. We have to fight for more summer jobs, more summer employment, and we have to create it, which I've been a leader on the city council fighting for summer jobs, working with our mayor, who deserves a lot of credit. Our mayor, who's been a wonderful mayor for the last 20 years. Boston's a better city today than it was yesterday.
Very true.
And for that, we should all be grateful. We also, working with him, are able to make sure that every year we have around 10,000 summer jobs, but we need more, up towards to 14,000 summer jobs. And so it's that, and it's also about reinvesting in community policing where police officers walk in the neighborhoods. Why is that important? Because by building relationships with neighborhoods, then information will be shared. And when information is shared, crime can be first prevented, which is what you really want. But second, if there happens to be crime, which you never do want, you could then solve it.
Right, exactly. That's probably a key piece right there, is just making sure that people are getting to know their police officers and being aware of what's happening. I think we've strayed away from that old school mentality where you look out for your neighbors, and I think part of that is because people seem to be so transient in the city now, so it's really
It's about once we stabilize our neighborhoods and focus on it, I also believe the crime rate will go down, but it only happens not because you wish it so. It happens by intention and leadership that says we're going to continue and fight to make sure that all of our neighborhoods are stabilized with good housing, good schools, and safe streets.
And it also is about reaching out to those kids who may not find their way to the summer programs and the summer jobs and other outlets. It's, you know, reaching those kids who are on that bad track, and part of that is through school. So real quickly, education, what are your goals for the Boston Public Schools?
You know, education is very personal to me in our public schools. My mom, my sister, and my wife are all Boston Public School teachers. me and all of my brothers and sisters, there's 5 of us, attended the Boston Public Schools, and all of my nieces and nephews go to Boston Public Schools. It is time now to really double down on public education. It starts with early childhood education. We know it works. We know that up until the 3rd grade, a child is learning to read, and from the 3rd grade on, they're reading to learn. Children who don't meet their reading benchmarks by the 3rd grade, 40% drop out. Right? We know that, so we have got to plan towards that by having 2 adults in the classroom, by partnering with our 39 universities in our schools, in our city, to do that. Then I think it's time to extend the school day. But not just to extend the school day for the sake of adding more time. Extend the school day to add arts, theater, music, dance, sports, and phys ed on our school day.
Right.
I believe you have to have the buy-in of teachers to extend the school day and parents, but you also need the buy-in of students, and they would look forward to that.
Right.
Next piece is looking at the curriculum in our high schools.
No algebra.
We're preparing.
Unless people want it.
Yeah,
the
but
kids.
we're preparing our children for jobs that existed yesterday, not the jobs that exist today. Every child in our high school should have access to science, technology, engineering, and math. Every child in our high school should have access to civics. Every child in our high school should have access to financial literacy so that they can live that American dream. And every child in our high school should have access to college preparatory classes that will teach them how to apply to colleges, how to fill out the financial aid forms, and how to apply to scholarships. And that's how I think we fix our schools.
Absolutely. Real quickly,
Yes.
Where can people find you online?
It's forwardwithfelix.com, and I would just ask those watching. One, I want to thank those watching. I've ran for office twice citywide. I've had the great blessing of winning twice, and I know it's because of viewers who have supported this campaign and put a faith in this effort. I'd ask that you support us in this campaign for mayor as we move to really build a better Boston. There's more information, including an entire platform at forwardfelix.com, and ways to find how you can be involved, and I invite you all to be a part of this campaign.
Great. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you,
here.
Seth. Thanks
and
for
good
having
luck.
me.
Thank you. And we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Bill Walczak.